to give you a quick piece of groundwork that led up to that, Boulder was originally formed as a mining town. So we're here at the mouth of the canyon. They discovered silver and gold in the mountains, and this was really just kind of a supply town. The citizens have made a series of decisions over the course of history that has turned Boulder into a creative class economy. They didn't know that that's what they were doing at the time, but they had a vision of what they wanted to create as a community. And the first thing they did was they decided that they needed some state infrastructure here. And they had a choice of going after the prison or the university. and they went for the university. So Boulder houses the flagship university. There are now university campuses in a number of Front Range cities. But up until the late 1950s, Boulder was a sleepy little town that had a university right in, well, it was on the edge of town at that time. Now it's in the middle of town. And tourism. So there was a fellow at the Chamber of Commerce that went around the country promoting the glacial water and the clear air, and people came here for a tuberculosis cure. And we had a big sanitarium here, and that's all it was. But the chamber actually got wind in the late 50s that the federal government was looking to move some of their federal laboratories off of the East Coast. They were concerned about being within missile range of the Russians, and there were weather things that happened on the East Coast that we don't have here, like hurricanes, and that we don't have earthquakes or mudslides either. Very safe for weather experiments and get great radio transmission at high altitude. So we actually passed the hat around town. We raised $90,000 to buy a piece of land in the middle of town, and we convinced the National Institute of Standards and Technology to come here in the late 1950s. That was the first of what is now 26 federal laboratories that we have between Denver and Fort Collins. And about 5 years later, we had an opportunity to recruit one of IBM's facilities, and that became a large high-tech facility. And as Bob mentioned, they went through their cycles in high-tech, and every time they had a downturn, those people left and started other high-tech companies. So all of a sudden, we've become an engineering, scientific, high-tech community. Unfortunately for a lot of people in town, we also went from being a town of 20,000 people to being a town of almost 90,000 people in about 2 decades. So growth scared people, and there were always people who wanted to maintain the quality of life and the university environment that we had here. And there were a lot of forward-thinking people who in the 50s, when they were building a lot of houses, said, we don't want to provide any services above a certain elevation. We want to protect the mountain backdrop so nobody builds on it. They set up height limitations. You can only build 4 stories so nobody gets a blocked view of the mountains. They bought up open space. We had the first open space tax in the country, where we taxed ourselves to buy all the property around us so that we would not have sprawl between here and Denver. So there were some visionaries in the community that decided early on that they wanted to protect this as a great quality of life. And what they didn't realize was in combination with the scientific and high tech and the quality of life, we now have what author Richard Florida would call a creative class economy. So these days, people can live wherever they want to live. They find a way to make a living doing what they're doing, living where they want to live. So Boulder has had the advantage of having the physical infrastructure, of having the university and the federal laboratories here, and now 200 miles of trails, 200 miles of bike lanes, that kind of physical infrastructure that allows people to live here and have a great quality of life. They have the intellectual infrastructure, where we have one of the highest education levels of any community, and graduate degree levels. The statistics that you sent out in your packet were amazing. I loved seeing everything laid out side by side with Fort Collins and Boulder and Santa Cruz. And what you're looking at is Boulder County. The statistics for the city of Boulder are even more exaggerated than that. More graduate degrees, less unemployment, kind of localized here. But what it created was a regional job center. So Boulder has now 100,000 people that live in town. We have 100,000 jobs. Not every man, woman, and child works in Boulder. But what you do see is about a 3 times in commuting rate than you see an out commuting rate. So I'm glad you're talking to the transportation people tomorrow. You're going to talk about parking. Affordable housing is another topic of hot conversation here, because obviously we can't house everyone that lives in the area. So these are these delicate balance issues that you have as a community when you're growing that quickly. One of the things that we also discovered is in the downturn that Bob referred to, that was the oil bust in the 90s, we also had a really big buildup to the dot-com bomb in 2002-03. I was recruited to the chamber in 2003. So I came when we had the highest unemployment rate that the city of Boulder had ever seen. And I decided that was a real asset, because when there are scarce resources, everybody wants to work together. So I built relationships with the city, with the university, with the federal labs, where we could work together in partnership. And what you see today is this great collaboration that has always been in Boulder that we have really been able to leverage over the years. So we have also been able to diversify our economy. So no longer is it just aerospace, bioscience, and technology and telecom that Bob was referring to. We've been able to grow a clean energy cluster, outdoor sports products, and natural and organic products. Natural foods were one of the centers of the organic food business. So we have a really nice diverse sector, and you see some really interesting innovation that happens between the sectors. So you're going to get a chance to talk to some folks tomorrow, and one of the things you'll realize is that you're in a really collaborative environment, and if there's one message that I want you to leave with, it's that this is all about collaboration. And it's not institutionalized. A lot of it's based on personal relationships, but we build partnerships and we build programs like the Innovation Center that leverage what everybody can bring to the table. So Bob mentioned that there is a Boulder Technology Incubator. It then became so successful that they started looking statewide, and they started supporting entrepreneurs throughout the metro area. And all of a sudden, they weren't in Boulder anymore. They were officed in Denver, and they had a big angel network. They had an advisor network that was mostly started in Boulder with our advisors, but now they're in Denver and they're serving a greater clientele. So when I got to the chamber, I had a great entrepreneurial economic development person who was doing some analysis on how can we help the community, how can we help economic development, and we noticed that there was this gap. We used to have this great technology incubator, we no longer have it. So I contacted the city, and we decided to match funds. I think we came up with maybe $15,000 to do a feasibility study, and brought in some great folks to analyze, is there a need in the community, and who would we serve if we had an innovation center? Is the business community willing to support it? And should we collaborate with the existing innovation center, or should we develop our own? So the process was, we went through this feasibility study. There was absolutely a need, there was absolutely an appetite, and there was some interest in deciding which way to move forward with it. So we formed a steering committee. Bob and a few great entrepreneurs in the community, or multipreneurs as we'll call them, serial entrepreneurs. It sounds like a crime when you say it. Multipreneurs, some great venture capital folks, a couple of IP attorneys, worked on this and developed a whole business plan around this innovation center. And you're going to hear more from Tim about how this works. But what I want to say about it is the City of Boulder and the Economic Development Agency, which is within the chamber. I don't know how it is at your chamber, but ours, the Economic Development Agency, the Convention and Visitor Bureau, and the Small Business Development Center are all under one roof at the chamber. Again, collaborative leadership, common vision, shared resources. Doesn't mean that we don't always want to head off in one direction. Sometimes we advocate for something that makes somebody else hide because all their funding is coming from the City of Boulder, and we're picking on the City of Boulder. But in general, it's a great way to leverage the resources. Again, collaborative approach. But we put up $25,000. The City of Boulder put $25,000, and that was the initial $50,000 of seed money to start the Innovation Center. We then went to the university. I had a friend who was in a book group who worked at the Technology Transfer Office, He made some introductions. We brought in the technology transfer folks from the university who said, we don't necessarily have the ability to start our own company. Sometimes they're graduate students or faculty and they don't even want to go out and start their own company with their technology. Sometimes they need a CEO to take the technology to market. And at the very least, they need advisors and people that Bob mentioned in the advisor network that can help them do that. So the Technology Transfer Office came in with some money and helped us. And then we went to the state and said, don't we have this great collaboration between the private sector, the university, and the city? Don't you want to help seed this? And the state of Colorado committed $150,000 over 3 years. They gave us $75,000 the first year, $50,000 the second year, and $25,000 the third year as a way to make us sustainable over time. It was just a great collaborative partnership. So from there, I'm not actually going to say much more about the Technology Center because I don't want to steal Tim's thunder. He's going to tell you a lot about what we've been able to do with the Boulder Innovation Center, which is now Innovation Center of the Rockies. But I did want to let you know that we have these collaborative relationships, and you're going to hear from so many partners. All the people that you're meeting with tomorrow were people I spent all my time with at the Chamber, just coming up with great ideas on how we can support the entrepreneurial community. And I will mention, just because we talked about it a little bit, there's a fellow named Brad Feld in town who started he was one of the co-founders of and early investors in a group called Techstars, which is an entrepreneurial accelerator. They now have offices around the United States, and he's helping to work with Startup America. He talks a lot about what it takes to be an entrepreneurial community and about the importance of having an entrepreneurially led entrepreneurial community. So those of us that work in economic development for universities, for government, venture capital people, IP attorneys, we can support them, but the initiative has to involve the entrepreneurs themselves. They have to have a very long-term vision, and there has to be a way for everybody to participate in this. And if you look around the Boulder community, I wish you were here for a week because there's so much more that we have to share with you. But in addition to the topics you're covering tomorrow and the things you'll get a chance to see, there is this Deming Center for Entrepreneurship that Bob mentioned at the business school, which now has tentacles across campus. There are 2 meetup groups. There's a New Tech meetup and a Clean Tech meetup. There's a Techstars program. There's a coffee club. There's a startup weekend. There's a hackathon going on this weekend. I mean, there are so many ways that you can plug into the startup community that everybody can apply their efforts and get excited about it. So we're happy that you're here. We love to share all of that with you and love to hear your thoughts on what you're doing and what we can do better as well. So,
could we break